Thanks for joining another Direct Connect. Today I'm joined by two of my good friends and fellow investigators. Actually, they're the ones that I call when I need help investigating. Scot Walker and Sandra Stibbards. One thing you may notice with Sandra on this one, you don't see her face. We're not entirely sure what's going on there. Might be that she's in the witness protection program. Could be that she's actually Taylor Swift. We're not sure. If you want to clear the air, Sandra.
I think what Sandra has said exactly is she will hunt you down if you take a picture of her. She will hunt you down and find you.
Oh, don't
And maybe
scare
even
them
hurt
yet.
you.
Come on. We don't want them to be too scared of me. But just let's put it this way. You don't want my undivided attention.
No, that's not scary at all.
Agreed.
No, not at all.
So with that fun opening there, can you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you do?
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for having us. I'm speaking first because Sandra made me go first. So I'm just calling you out right there, Sandra.
Okay.
This is how it's good. The whole thing's going to be like this, the whole session. My name's Scot Walker. I'm an corporate investigator and private investigator in the state of Arizona. I have previously to being in the private sector, was in the military and law enforcement for over 20 years, working with some task forces that you may or may not have heard of, like the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. Went to the private sector, worked in Silicon Valley for a couple of iconic tech companies, NVIDIA and Facebook, and now I work for one of the largest paper and pulp manufacturing organizations in the world as their director of investigations.
That's impressive, Scott. That really is. I love it. I'm not nearly that impressive, but I have been an investigator for 32 years. I've had my company for over 28 now. My company is Camelot Investigations. I'm a licensed investigator based in Southern California. However, the kind of work I do encompasses the entire world. I work internationally. My main focus is financial fraud and crime, but I do a lot of other things such as online brand protection for counterfeiting investigations. I do business espionage investigations, a lot of corporate and things on counterintelligence, competitive intelligence. I even do physical penetration testing and online vulnerability assessment. So I'm kind of all over the place, but it's all based on everything being hidden. People that are hiding their identities, their assets, stolen assets, target website, shell companies, anything like that. And from there, about 15 years ago, I created a training on open source intelligence. It's a 2-day training. I created it for the feds at first, and then I decided to bring it to the rest of the world, and I've been teaching and training all over the world ever since. I'm very fortunate, and I am part of ASIS along with Scott and Nick, and we're all part of the investigations community. Nick's bigger than us. He's overseeing us, but either way, Scott and I have done a lot of presentations together and love talking together, so hopefully we'll have some fun today.
I'm just going to correct you there. I'm just holding on, trying to keep up as best I can.
You're doing great.
So humble.
So the first question I'm going to jump right in with, because it resonates with most of the people that we work with at Archer on our side, is what advice would you give to someone who has to conduct corporate or compliance investigations, or really any investigations, as an additional duty? I know I saw that a little bit of security. Usually our HR tried to do it, sometimes legal, sometimes safety.
Yeah. Well, safety has a mandate, right? Which is nice. Our EH&S partners, if they are certified safety professionals, there is an actual investigations track. So I'm more comfortable with them doing investigations to a point. But I think the most important thing for those who have a collateral duty is if it's not your primary focus, figure out what certification kind of works for your industry and go get a certification or go get training or education. SHRM, for our HR partners, has a course on HR investigations. I don't know that it's a certification, it may be, but highly recommend those folks. For our partners in legal, they went to law school. Many of them say they know something about criminal law, but it was like one class in law school, and then they went on to whatever specialty it is. My experience has been that they're usually like patent attorneys and things like that, which is super important. But that doesn't make them a good investigator, and it certainly doesn't make them understand or give them the bona fides to be a criminal investigator. So finding that certification or that training is really important so that they get that foundation and they won't get themselves into trouble. They won't violate somebody's rights. Even in the private sector, there are a lot of tricky things when you're doing an investigation that can get you in trouble real quick. So that's my advice. Go seek training, go seek certification, especially for our security partners. A lot of security partners come out of military and law enforcement, but they didn't have necessarily an investigative background. And so even for them, figure out what in your industry is a good investigation certification. Go for that.
I like that because you guys are both in the corporate world, and for myself, I'm standing outside the corporate world as a consultant, and I'm brought into corporations. So asking what advice you'd give if they're going to have to start working on investigations, my advice is if they're going to have somebody investigating and you don't have an investigator on board, such as either one of you, hire somebody like myself to take care of it. So because Scott's advice is amazing, because if they don't want to come outside the company and use somebody to investigate, you couldn't have said it better with the certifications and getting training, so they become an investigator. But if they're not going to take that road, and they have some serious stuff going on, especially concerns such as business espionage, you want to have somebody that specializes in what they're investigating. So my recommendation is, if it's a specific situation that you have to investigate, I would go outside, get a licensed investigator like myself that specializes in that field, and bring them on board that way. Don't have to hire them, just a consultant, do the retainer and have them take care of it, because that way you're not making any mistakes and you're not having any problems. So that's my advice as far as the corporate world goes.
Yeah, it's even when I was at the utility and I was one of the 2 certified investigators there, what I always told people was, I know just enough to make sure we don't screw it up really bad until we get a professional in. Whether if it's criminal going across the street for us to the sheriff's department, or if it was something else, bringing in someone like you, Sandra. I'm a generalist. I'm kind of like the old family doctor that just does a little bit of everything, and then we'll send you off to the dentist for a cavity or ER for a broken bone. I think that's the big key piece there, is to understand what you're doing.
That's a great analogy, by the way.
I use that with lawyers a lot. Is I understand your general counsel. I don't go to my dentist for a broken bone. Just going to say this right here. You're really good at a lot of things, but I need a specialist to go deep dive on this. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of people overlook with investigations. It's like, an investigation's an investigation's an investigation. So, it really isn't.
And you touched on something that I just want to feed off of, because you brought up attorneys. And a lot of times I will have attorneys that contact me, because I mainly work with attorneys. And they will contact me and say, well, this is what I want you to do for the investigation. And I'm going, wait a minute, you're not the investigator. Why don't you tell me what you're attempting to accomplish, and then I will tell you how I'm going to handle it. Because it's exactly what you said, Nick. Attorneys sometimes want to say, okay, this is how the investigations go. And no, that's not how they go. So good point on that, by the way.
I had some fun with my alma mater. They had kind of a higher profile investigation recently, and they were, we can't do this, and you wouldn't understand those. I'm like, well, tell me more. I might understand a thing or two.
Yeah.
Tell me more about what you can't say, because. But with that, when you're dealing with kind of that generalist, or you're stepping in to help somebody else out, any war stories or thoughts or things that you've run into where somebody else may have started the investigation, good or bad? Either they did everything well, or probably more entertaining, they did something crazy like, I think, Scott, you were saying earlier, they had the VP of HR meet up with somebody for coffee offsite.
Yeah. I appreciate our cross-functional partners in a corporation. Sometimes they're a little overzealous. So I've had everything from like a manager. I found out that this manager was going to my security team when I worked in Silicon Valley and demanding that they give them badging records for an employee. And they were conducting their own investigation, essentially a wage and hour, time card fraud type investigation. And they were taking administrative action and then terminating the employee eventually. And when I found out, I was like, well, hold on, what are you doing? And because, there's certain things that the leadership in an organization needs to be aware of. And badging records are probably not one of them, unless you're the general counsel, unless you're, very high ranking person, because one, we don't want our employees to necessarily understand everything about security. I've had a similar situation where I was in a training course with a bunch of other employees, and this one coworker of mine who's not in security pulled up on his phone the security cameras for his location. He's like, "Oh yeah, check this out. This is really cool." And I'm like, "Whoa, why do you have that?" "Oh, IT gave me access." "Oh, okay." So IT can be a problem too. And look, a lot of these folks are well-meaning, but they don't understand the complexities of what they're necessarily doing, and so whether it's security or investigations, leave that to somebody who's certified or somebody that's their main responsibility as much as possible, because you'll have folks who will do things like what we were talking about earlier, where I found out that when they would do hostile terminations in one organization I was in, they would send HR just down the street to Starbucks. And that's when they do like, here's the stuff from your desk, and you give us the laptop, and that whole like exchange of information. Give me your badge. By the way, we had to remind HR to get the badge from them and to let us know so we can kill the badge. That was something that they weren't doing. And then if they did it, they didn't do it with any consistency. So we would find out that some HR BPs had, a desk drawer full of badges. Anyways, nightmares continue, but they were meeting folks who were hostilely terminated, meaning that an investigation had come up, probably on the HR side. They were terminating the relationship, or they put them on leave, and so they didn't want to bring them back to the office. I get it, right? Depending on why you're terminating them, you don't maybe want them to come back, but HR was making these threat-based decisions and going out and just, "Oh, you're too dangerous to come to the office." Well, if you're too dangerous to come to the office, why are you meeting with them at a Starbucks, right? Who's looking at this from a threat perspective? So, those are just a few of the things that we would have to jump in. It usually is on a Friday at 3 p.m., right? Just like when we were feds, that's when everything breaks loose. And I've had people, even who has suspected an employee was intoxicated or drunk or something, and they said, "Hey, we got to take them to the clinic to go get tested, whether it be blood or urine or whatever, for some policy violation." "Oh, the HRBP just gave them a ride, or the manager just gave them a ride in their car," or even worse, "Hey, just jump in your car and go get tested, and then bring the results back." I'm like, they're suspected of being intoxicated. What are you doing, right? So I like an attorney, we will say, call us early and often, because jumping in and trying to kind of unravel the mess that they may have made, hopefully they didn't. Hopefully they kept good notes. 9 times out of 10, HR takes no notes, and the only thing you see in the personnel file will be that they were terminated, and then nobody knows why. And then they want to get rehired, and their background check comes back, and they're like, "Oh, they used to work here, but they were terminated. Does anybody know why?" And then they come to you, and they're like, "Hey, can you guys find out why they were terminated?" And it's like, well, you take bad notes, so we don't know. But anyways, it's things like that. I've had the same thing with IT. IT will see weird traffic on the network, and then they'll go, "Hey, something happened. Can you help us?" And so 9 times out of 10, the way things start is they've tripped over themselves, or they've tripped into something that they're not sure about, and then they remember, "Oh yeah, we've got a corporate security team, and they have an investigator, and he knows what to do on everything." And I'll get like half a message, like, "Hey, can you be on this conference call in like 30 minutes?" I'm like, "What's this about?" And they're like, "We had a breach, or we had a this, or we had a that." And it's like, "Oh, okay, thanks for bringing me in on the front end." Usually it's on the back end, and they're trying to kind of recover the time spent on the investigation. So that's where I just come off and say, early and often, we have a high level of trust in the organization. We see all the dirty laundry. We don't talk about the dirty laundry. And we know what everybody in the organization, good and bad, is doing. So 9 times out of 10, when it's somebody who's not an investigations professional, it's because of that. But I have had security professionals where they were kind of doing their own investigation, and it rose to a level where we had a VIP involved, and I, as a senior leader, had to take that investigation over. Not that that employee, that security person had done anything wrong. They were doing fine, but it reached a level of where like, for the company's sake, we should have somebody who at a very high level understands these things and has a higher level of trust with senior leadership in the corporation. So I've had that kind of thing.
Well, on my end, again, not being in the corporations, I have actually been brought in quite often because corporations attempted to do their own investigations and it didn't go well. So with that, it happens a lot. You're talking about all the things that you just mentioned, Scott, but even when they have their solid corporate investigators, sometimes they just aren't getting what's needed or it turns out wrong. I mean, currently right now, I'm just on a private section of this. I'm actually doing a case just to help because they already used another investigations firm and they just didn't get what they wanted. So it's now in my hands to get what they really want and hopefully dig up more dirt. So, which is, what I'm famous for, finding the stuff that nobody else can. But yeah, I've actually been brought on a lot, and it's because of the situations like what you're talking about, Scott, where they're attempting to do investigations and they mess it all up. And something goes terribly wrong, and then, again, they come to a consultant instead. So I've been very fortunate in that aspect. But yeah, those things happen a lot.
But by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. If you're a company and you want to have parallel investigations going on, I think that's healthy. It's kind of like you have a little bit of competition going on. As long as they don't cross into each other or they should be independent of themselves, I think that's healthy, and you never know. To Sandra's point, you never know what you're going to find, and having somebody who maybe has different access or they see the world a little bit differently, like Sandra and I do, I think that's sometimes it's a good idea. I've seen that as well, where you have an outside consultant come in or PI come in and work a situation just to see if they come up with something different.
Yeah, and it's very helpful to do that, actually, just to make sure they haven't missed anything. But when it comes to the crossover on the outside of this, like I like the idea of, having an outside one come in and work with the internal one. But on another note, I had a situation where my client hired me and hired another investigator to work the exact same investigation, and I discovered that somebody else was working on it. That can be detrimental. Just so you know, you never, as a corporation, you never want to hire two investigators that don't know they're both investigating, because that can create problems, especially if one of them doesn't really know how to do it properly, which is what happened because I figured out who else was working on the case. So you start getting this crossover. You have to be able to communicate with each other. Right? If you want to have 2 or 3 different investigation firms working together, that's great. Then we can all talk and we don't redo and we don't mess things up for the other investigator. But when you don't ever want to hire 2 separate entities, have them work the same case and see if they come up with the same results, because it will screw up the case big time. Just so you know.
I've seen that too.
Yes. And I couldn't believe the situation I was in, and I was not a happy camper. It was a long time ago, but I've never forgotten it. It's crystal clear. So, yeah.
I think the one that I've had the most is when I get called in and, hey, we know this person did this thing. I need you to go prove it. Like,
Yeah.
My favorite one is when I was still in the military. And they're like, hey, Captain, we're going to have you go investigate the sergeant that we know lost some stuff. As I started unpacking things, I remember sitting in a meeting with a bunch of chief warrant officers who, if you're not familiar with chief warrant officers, they're ghosts, gods, kind of maybe like Thor in the Avengers world.
Yeah.
And all 4 of them kind of look at each other and go, all right, are we going to tell this guy what actually happened? And I'm like, what? And it turned out it was a full-bird colonel that had done some pretty bad stuff. And I was like, stepping back, kind of like to your point, Scott, like captains don't get to say colonel screwed up. But yeah, I was told, hey, this is what happened. You go prove it. Same kind of thing. We had some time issues and people wanted to use badge records, and I had to train both our legal and HR. Like, all that badge system tells you without cameras that you guys keep declining to put up is that piece of plastic was there at a time. It doesn't mean that person was there or wasn't there. So I was just trying to explain to them the different
Yep.
types of evidence and what that means, and that there is no silver bullet almost ever in an investigation. There's a lot. You got to stack it up.
Yeah, I think there a lot of the assumptions come from our non-security or investigative partners come from, oh well, I saw James Bond do this once, or I've watched every episode of The Wire, so I know how to be an investigator.
We had a lot of CSI experts when I was at the utility.
Yeah,
I know it was that guy because he's weird.
I mean,
well, yeah, but so are
yeah, yeah, I have those too.
The other fun one I just got to throw out, because you reminded me of it, Scott, when you were talking about how to get somebody to the hospital for the testing. I had my deputy he was designated to be that guy for a while, and one of the HR ladies grabbed me. She's like, you need to quit sending people with the cute guy to the hospital, because they get 3 hours of unpaid time off hanging out with the cute guy in a car. It's like, I hadn't thought about that, and I don't really think he's that cute, but okay.
Yeah.
It's not my type.
Well, we even had the conundrum of, okay, so we ordered an Uber. We got the corporate Uber to come pick him up. And then it was like, well, we actually had an employee go off on the Uber driver. This poor guy was just like, I just was ordered to pick you up and take you over here. And the person was so intoxicated to some level. But then it was like, okay, well, is there a cutover point where you got to call security and you got to let us know so we can help make the decision of, you're too intoxicated to go get quote unquote tested, or something's going on with you, and maybe we need to have an ambulance come or law enforcement come, because you might be a danger to yourself or others. So that stirred up that conversation. And so a lot of these things, and this is where, like, definitely in a corporation, when you have these situations, got to have that conversation. Take advantage of that issue, and the momentum it's caused, and as everybody's freaking out, be like, okay, good. This is an opportunity for a policy or a procedure or training, or So all the who said you never let a good crisis go to waste? I can't remember who said that, but it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Line.
Yep.
That was the motto we had when I was at the utility. Was just, this happened. Now we get this policy approved. That was one of the first policies we put in, was that none of the security technology could be used for investigations without the approval of both myself as the head of security and the HR director.
That's right.
Like,
that's exactly.
There's been a culture where supervisors
I'm
are like, hey, I need the camera footage for this parking lot. Like, why? Just because somebody backed into my car. I'm like, okay, let's start an investigation.
That's it.
Or I want to see what time that guy got here. Like, nope, we don't use security to track your employees. Do your job. If you have a time and attendance issue, go to HR with it. They'll bring it back.
That's it.
I think those are some of the biggest things that we see, particularly with the smaller places or the smaller shops, is they don't understand. Sure, we can do that. It's like, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
How do you all handle, or have you had the situation? I don't know if you have, Sandra, but when somebody, it's usually from HR, the manager says, "Hey, we haven't heard from so and so in a few days. Can you guys go over to his house and check on him?" Have you had that where you have to do a welfare check on a person? The reason why I say that is because it's a bit of an investigative thing, and being in a global company, I've had it happen even in places like India. During a crisis, we had some people who just hadn't checked in, and it took us several weeks to figure out. And this was an environmental crisis. It happened to be a flood, and we had employees that were in that area. And took us probably a week or two to find everybody. And I called this the next of kin contact, which was my last resort, because you never want to call next of kin on anything. And I said, "Hey, have you seen this person's name?" And he said, "Yeah, we're playing Xbox. He's sitting right next to me." The guy had taken leave and not communicated it in the appropriate way to HR, and he thought he was good. And he was just doing his thing, hanging out at his family's home, which was hundreds, if not thousands, of miles away from the crisis zone. And so, when you're investigating things, this is why you have an investigator. We see the world a little different than everybody else, and we have tons of resources that our HR partners don't have. So, whether it's doing a welfare check or something, that we were talking about doing surveillance on people. I've had managers do that too, where like, oh, I think he's stealing from the company. So I sat out back of the loading dock at 3 o'clock in the morning, came in early. Like, what are you doing? You know? So it's situations like that make me shake my head. But a lot of them are good meaning. They just don't, they watch too much TV and they just don't know what the right process should be. And they don't know what the resources are. And so to that extent, that's our fault. We need to be communicating what our resources are, and not in a scary way. A lot of us, at least in corporate investigations, can come off as kind of the black hatters and, well, you guys do spooky stuff, and we do, but I don't want people to be afraid to talk to me. I want them to know who I am. I'm not undercover. Sandra is, by the way, and that's totally righteous. Yes, totally righteous. By the way, Sandra's can be a vendor for me, and I would not want anybody to know who Sandra was. Because those are the people I'm going to use for surveillance. They're going to do covert things for me. But I, as the company, director of investigations, am not going to do that. So I'm going to be a public face of our corporate security team with our CSO as a good partner. So I think a lot of people, they assume that investigations is a scary thing, and really, what I'm there to do is protect the employees and the assets of the organization.
I think that's a great way to put it. I think that's one of the pieces we ran into early on. Is my boss said she didn't want either of us to work on any investigations, and I said, yeah, you probably don't want that. Let's put some bounds around it. Let's basically just say we're only going to stick to company property. How about that? So that was one of the things we had where we actually had HR ask us to do a welfare check, and I said no, but I'm happy to call my friends over at the sheriff's department. And
there it is.
Like, I think the entire time I was at that utility, I think I went to an employee's residence that wasn't a social event once. And that was somebody who'd been terminated, and it was to take their personal effects back because we determined there was no need for him to come to the office. We were just going to. So one of my security guards and I loaded all the stuff up. Actually, two of them. So we took all three of us over to his house. Here's your stuff. Good luck. Ended up being the least threatening person I've ever met. I think I was more afraid of my toddlers at the time than him, but. Shifting gears, I know we talked a little bit about this on the last ASIS investigations call. You two really covered a lot of it, but the use of AI, I know at ISC West when we were there last month or month and a half, whenever that was, everything is AI, but you had some pretty interesting stories and things you've seen with AI and investigations. So you just go to ChatGPT right now and say, hey, go investigate Nick Weber for whatever, and it does it, right?
Well, it's funny. Two things. We first of all, the investigation community meets the last. Sandra, is it the last Tuesday of every month?
The last Tuesday of every month at noon Eastern time.
Thank you.
Now that we've got the time down properly.
Yes.
We had some trouble with that.
We did have some trouble with that. So we definitely want people to come and join us. We're trying to do like a webinar every month where we're like just learning all the way up through the rest of the year if we can. Sandra and I did speak last month about AI. And I'll let Sandra talk about the negative aspects of AI, because she has so many like warnings that I think are excellent. But it's fascinating to see what's happening with AI and how fast it's growing, how fast it's learning. And so I think there are some things that you can do. Certainly not plugging in, hey, investigate this person for me. Sandra will tell a story about that, which is a horror story. And I won't steal her thunder. But for sure, there's a lot of things that I've used that are AI based or generated. And the example that I gave in our training was I was working a business email exploitation case where a fake email, or we weren't sure how it was generated, was sent, kind of man-in-the-middle attack, sent from a vendor to our treasury, and payments were made not to the right people. So long story short, In investigating those emails, though, it was really easy for me to identify. Sure, the header was off, the emails were off. It looked like they were doing a really good job at the messaging in the email, though. And so that could mean one of two things. Either they are English speakers or they are using some type of technology. So I used several different, like 4 or 5 different AIs to identify AI text. So there are a few, nothing really is great yet. It's still kind of in development. But what I was using it for is help me understand the text from this email if it was AI generated. And some of the apps I used, I think 5 different apps, some of the apps gave me a score, like a gas meter score. Good, bad, average, great. And some just said, yeah, this is not AI generated. So over the kind of the totality of all of the different apps that I was using, because I wanted to kind of play around and get different aspects, I got a good feeling that the information was generated by a human. And what we know with business email compromise is that a lot of those attacks come from people who are not primarily English speakers. And so because of that, as we're looking across these different attack vectors and different messaging, one of the telltale signs that something's not legitimate is they misspell a name or they misspell a common word. The Brits and the Canadians will spell defense differently than Americans will, for example. A lot of things they'll spell differently, much more kind of French influenced, especially our friends in Canada. So, as I'm looking at those things, I'm trying to utilize AI to help me understand messaging. I'm trying to use AI to help me understand, is this a real picture? Is this a real video, or was it created? The technology is not, it's good. It's not able to give us something that's so good yet that we can't tell with the naked eye. The funny thing about AI is if it generates a picture, sometimes you've got to look at the hands, because the hands and the fingers that have too many fingers or too many hands. For some reason, that's a thing with AI. They can't get the hands right. So I think that's what's interesting is as an investigator, what I'm looking to utilize AI for is how do I cut down on that time that it takes me to do reviews, to do things that are kind of repetitive. One thing that I'll say, and then I'll let Sandra take over kind of the negative aspects of AI, is I absolutely will see us in the next few years generating reports from perhaps our case notes or from the information that we're getting. If you're doing a business email compromise case, maybe all the emails have to go into your case file. We're going to, at a push of a button and within seconds, be able to generate something that looks like what I wrote or what you wrote. And I think that's incredibly powerful to help us cut down on the time. I mean, nobody likes report writing. I don't know anybody. And if you do like report writing, you're a liar. But no one likes report writing. So what can we cut down on those things that are too boring or too mundane or too dangerous? Give that to AI and let them crunch on it. Now, with that said, you are the expert. So if it's saying something that didn't happen, you got to jump on it and make that correction and make that change. I just think that AI is so powerful. They're within the next, maybe even not next few years, but I think, for example, Axum, the people that make Taser and the body cameras, they have an application that has AI-based aspects that translates that video to text and puts that into a report format so that you literally have a kind of a back and forth what's happening on the body cam that you can put into your report. That's incredibly powerful. So when you can take audio and video and pictures and text and put that into an AI generation and it generates a report, man, that's gonna save us a ton of time. Go ahead, Sandra.
Yeah, the AI is great. I love it. I've been using just feeding off your positive before I really rear the ugly head of this. I love when I'm writing an email now to somebody and I'll just take it, put it into Chat GPT and go rewrite, and it always makes all these pretty words. And I just love it. I mean, and you're right, I hate report writing, but I have not, as of yet, used AI to write reports. I have not. And here's why. And now we're going to get to the ugliness of it.
Yeah.
So what you were saying, it hasn't been around for a really long time as far as how it's creating and developing its information. The problem with AI right now, and I believe this is going to be a never-ending problem, is that it's learning from whatever we put into it. All the human aspects, we're putting the information in there, and it's creating helpful details, finding things for us, things like that. The problem is the amount of misinformation that is entered in. You know, I don't even know right now if it's drawing off the dark web, but it probably is. Everything is misinformation there. But let's face it, we're dealing with, or at least I know I am, I'm dealing with bad guys all the time. I'm dealing with people that are trying to create an identity that's not real, putting false information about everything. And they're doing it about companies, about activities, just about their own identities. So all this misinformation, now AI is utilizing that, what it thinks is real information, to create more information. So now it's creating misinformation for us as well. So it's about as ugly as it can get. And I'm going to give you an example of how it also isn't perfect and can make traumatic, and I mean traumatic because this is a bad situation, can make traumatic errors. It's very detrimental. We had a situation where a woman, all she had was a screenshot from Copilot, which is Microsoft's AI platform. She sent us a screenshot. Me and a colleague of mine were reading through this, and she said, please find the proof that my boyfriend is a pedophile. And because this actually stated that this person with this name was arrested in, it was called Operation Exposed, all right? And it was online pedophilia. All these people were arrested in this situation. It was a couple of years ago, and what it was, they were targeting kids that were 12 to 14 years old, all online. So here we have this stating that he was arrested in this operation, this is what they were doing, this is what he was doing. Then I start trying to dig, and you guys already know, if I'm digging, if it's out there, I'm going to find it. I will find it. There was nothing. You need a very unusual last name. It started with a P, ended in an R, and I'm telling you that for a reason. I think it was about 8 or 9 letters long, can't remember exactly, but very unusual name. So it was easy. I could Google the guy and he'd just pop up, right? And, you know, I saw the people searches and Google and, you know, looked at him on Bing. And so I'm digging into all the court records in that state that supposedly he resided. We looked at all the other states he was in, looked at federal records, looked for arrest records. Then I got into my pay database. Couldn't find an ounce of dirt on this guy. There was nothing. So why am I not finding the record? Did it get expunged? That would have been pretty darn quick because it just happened like 2 years ago. So what happened was I start searching AI again. Comes up for me again. Then it doesn't come up for me. Then I suddenly can't find it. I'm going on the other platforms. Ultimately, a couple of weeks later, I came back to it. It brought it up again and gave me a little more information. Then I asked it, can you give me the sources where you got it? Gives me 3 news outlets. What do? I open up all 3. There were arrests for a different guy. What it was doing was reporting on somebody with a completely different last name that was arrested. And that was the resource, and all 3 articles, yet it was telling me it matched his name. Wasn't even similar. It wasn't like it was a letter or 2 off. The only letters that matched was the first letter and the last letter of the name. And so here you have AI telling us this guy was arrested as a pedophile when he was never arrested as a pedophile. So as an investigator, and I know you both know this, we have to verify. You cannot verify enough information. So it's fun to utilize AI and have it help you rewrite things, whatever. Don't let it do your investigations for you. Please, oh please, because guess what? Although AI is really making things difficult for us as investigators, especially someone like myself who uses OSINT, you know, for everything, that's my main tool, AI fits right into that world. You know what? I don't even bother. I don't even put it into AI when I'm doing investigation because of the misdirection I got from that one sample. Now, mind you, when I teach people how to create identities, or in the cyber world, they call them sock puppets, so you can protect your activity when you're online, because I teach this as part of my trainings. I teach people how to create an identity, not for malicious purposes, but to protect your own identity. Sometimes they want to have an image with their profile. Maybe they're setting up a gaming page. They might be setting up an X account. They want a profile image. Don't go out and just copy and paste a link from the internet, because trust me, that is traceable and you don't want to be stealing somebody's identity. But you can use certain platforms like thispersondoesnotexist.com. Go to that site and it will generate an AI image. It looks like real people, but it's not. I'm sure there are doppelgangers out there that match, but they're not real people because it's AI generated. And you can just keep hitting enter to have it regenerate new images. I have a few cool sites that do this, ones that are even better, but that's just an example. So you can utilize things like that to help protect your own identity. But again, AI, it's a real slippery slope. And also, don't be feeding your own negative information out there either, because it will populate that as well. So we do have great uses for it, but you have to be real careful, especially as an investigator.
Yeah, AI. I think we're seeing a lot of it. I think just across the board where the information's not quite right. I love the pictures, like Scott mentioned, of 6, 7, 8 fingers, 2 hands, 4 hands. Yeah, it's even the reports. I've used that a little bit. Like, hey, I'm kind of at a writer's block. Throw something at, like throw a question at it, and it comes back with answers. I'm like, that's not right. So it's still learning.
Exactly.
You definitely have to read and proofread and go back through and make sure. And especially when you start to get into technical writing, where happy and glad don't mean the same thing. So I think it's important to make those distinctions. But I'd say with that, thanks for a great conversation. Always learn a lot when I talk to you two. A little bit scared. I was less scared this time. I'm not moving out in the woods today. Maybe. Still early to see. But where can folks find you if they have more questions or they do need to bring you in to help out?
You can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Scott with 1T, Walker, like the Texas Ranger. And that's the best way to find me. Also at corporatesecurityuniversity.com as well. Carlos Francisco and I have a training platform where we teach people, teach security folks about customer service. You can find me there.
Great. You see the spelling of my name right on the screen there, Sandra Stibbards. You can also find me on LinkedIn, and you can also find me on X, previously known as Twitter, and I still have the habit of calling it Twitter. But I have a couple of websites that you can check out. My main business website is CamelotInvestigations.com. And then if you're interested in learning more about my trainings and learning how to do your work more efficiently and quicker, and learning how to dig things out in a much deeper way, go to my OSINT website, which is opensourceintelligencetraining.org. And you can reach out to me by email, Sandra@CamelotInvestigations.com. And just as a side note, I will be in San Francisco July 18 and 19, conducting my 2-day training. It is an open registration, so you can sign up for that and attend. And ASIS in the Bay Area, their Bay Area chapter is hosting it. So please come join me, and hopefully I'll see many of you there.
Thanks for joining. Take care.
Your support drives us forward. Don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications, ensuring you never miss out on valuable insights. When it comes to safeguarding your business, Archer is your trusted partner. Explore our robust solutions at archerint.com. Get in touch with an email or phone call and fortify your company's defenses. We value your input. Share your thoughts, questions, or topics you'd like us to cover, and tune in every other Wednesday for a brand new episode of Direct Connect.